Good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome you all. We are so glad you are joining the Los Angeles County Office of Education for the All In Safe and Welcoming Schools webinar series. This is the first of 8 sessions that includes live webinars and supporting videos, study guides, and materials which focus on practical strategies. This month's series is Navigating Social Emotional Learning, Cracking the Codes of Caring. We are so pleased to introduce Reverend Dr. Aliah MaJon as she shares her expertise as a trauma-sensitive specialist and consultant for the Museum of Tolerance. Thank you, and here is Dr. Aliah MaJon.
Good afternoon. Hello, everybody. I like to get really energetic in the beginning because webinars feel like I can't even see you, but you can see me. So greetings. I am so glad to be here. It's such an honor to be the very first speaker in this series. And I want to just say a few words, I should say, about the subtitle. It's Navigating Social Emotional Learning. And of course, on this slide, on this PowerPoint slide, it says how to build an SEL roadmap. And we're going to talk a lot about that. We're going to get some specific instructions and a lot of suggestions. But the cracking the codes of caring, I want to spend just a minute or maybe 35 seconds on to tell you that when I use that phrase, cracking the codes, which is so popular out there in the world, I really mean it. I mean that it's important for us to begin to understand how to open up those doors and those windows into caring for students in a little bit of a different way. Now, I personally believe that you would not be here as an educator if you did not care about children. There's just no way that you could be in that job and not care about children because it is really a stressful job. I know. I have many educators in my life. And to care about children, especially now in the times that we live in with the pandemic and all the things that have been going on about virtual learning and so on and so forth, to let them know, and I know they're back in school now, but to let them know that you care about them is, for me, the number one thing that you can do to help them to succeed. So I'm going to share with you quite a few things, but we're going to start with a video. Now, social emotional learning is very much related to what's called, trauma-informed practices. And you probably have heard of those. And one of the spokespeople for trauma-informed care happens to be Oprah Winfrey. If we were seeing each other, if you could actually see me, I'd say, raise your hand if you don't know who Oprah is, because I know that you do know who she is. Probably almost everyone around the world knows who she is. So we're going to start with that. But what this webinar is based on is a program or a set of tools that I've created myself. They're called the Secret Language of Equity. And although there are 7 key practices, I'm going to share 4 key practices with you in this webinar. So next slide, please. Now, this particular quote is my favorite, and I use it in almost every single workshop or course that I get to lead. Sometimes I have it in different colors. Today you get the red one. It's kind of a reddish pink color because we've got so much color on all of the branding material for this program. I'm going to read this word for word, and I want you to just take it in. No significant learning can happen without a significant relationship. And it's by James Comer. And we may not have even heard who he is. It doesn't matter. His words speak for themselves. So think about it. Just take a second and kind of think back in your own life at the significant relationships that you have had that have impacted you enough to say that you carry them with you now. I know that for myself, I can think about my 3rd grade teacher. So let's put it in the context of school. Her name was Mrs. Chenault, Chenault. And a lot of times the young people, made fun of her name because it was kind of unusual. What I know is that she was the start of my road to success. She kept me after school to let me know that she appreciated who I was. So I know for sure that you have probably had a teacher or a mentor in your life that impacted you enough for them to be with you to this very day. And you are those people for your students. So no significant learning can happen without a significant relationship. Next slide, please. Now, this is a 60-minute video. In 2018, Oprah was a guest contributor on the 60-minute show on Sunday. And she talked with Dr. Bruce Perry about childhood trauma. And we're going to watch that video for 5 minutes, and then we're going to do a process on the other side. I want to just listen carefully to what she has to say. Oprah is always very forthcoming. She shares herself with the world. And I truly appreciate that about her. And she does it in this video as well. So take a listen. We can start the video now. All right, so we're back. And I hope that you got as much from that video as I got. The first time I saw it, and I've seen it many times since 2018 when it first came out. So what I'd like you to do now in the chat's going to be open, is put into the chat from one word to one sentence, what did you take away from this video? And the video is on trauma, which is also related to social emotional learning. I'd like to see you populate the chat right now. So we're just going to take a few minutes for that. So go ahead. Yes. Relationships, what happened to you? Connectedness, rapport. It's not what's wrong with you, it's what happened to you. Yes, yes. The questions you ask matters. Young people want to feel like they matter. Connecting is therapeutic. Social awareness, connecting. Love and connecting. Relationships we build with our students. Everyone needs to feel valued. Investing time in creating relationships, absolutely. When someone is acting up, ask what happened to them, not what's wrong with them. Very good, very good. So keep going, keep going. And for those who've written already in the chat, just take a peek and look at what's there. I've been saying some things out loud, and I'm going to let you do that now, because this is really important. Your own takeaway is really what stays with you. So we want you to take away the things that you are hearing and be able to put those to use. Every human being was born to be caring and to be cared for. Absolutely. All right. We're doing pretty good with that. Next slide, please. So I am going to now let you know that I am a kind of bridge between science and Oprah Winfrey. Oprah likes to let the truth come out, and she does very often just tell it like it is. And so she says, Dr. Perry is not going to use the word love because he's a scientist. Well, I would like to give you another word for love, another way of expressing love, and that's to have regard. You probably have heard this word before in many different contexts. You may have heard it in school, social emotional learning. We talk about regard. And so this came directly from dictionary.com. It's not from me. And I want to just touch upon a few of the things that are here. And I'm not going to read the whole thing. To have or show respect or concern for. So there's no way that you can care about someone and not also respect them. It's not possible to happen. If you just think about how that feels inside of you, when you care about someone, you respect them almost automatically. It comes with the package of caring. To think highly of a student, excuse me, to think highly of and to hold in esteem. Now, the word esteem, is that something that we typically use for students? Probably not. We usually use it for people that are very accomplished. We hold them in esteem. They have credentials. They've got background. We know them as a celebrity, whatever the case may be. But what if we all held each other in esteem? If we knew that something special exists in this person, this student, this child, or this adult, your colleagues even, and that you want to be a witness to their magnificence. And so therefore, you're going to hold them in esteem, and you're going to relish those moments that they'll get to shower you with whatever their gifts are. And that's how I like to think about the word esteem. And also, of course, you're going to observe them. So we're going to talk a little bit about observing in a few minutes. You're going to look at them, to observe them, to have regard for them. You have to check out who they are. Who are you? How can I be with you? What is it that will establish rapport between us, like you said in the chat? And of course, to be related to them in a way that's in relationship to them, you're interacting with them in meaningful ways. And so therefore, you're having a relationship. And the last thing is to look at them and to conceive of them in a specific and appropriate manner. And I'm just going to pull the word appropriate out of that sentence and say, in today's world, we know that we have to be appropriate with young people, no matter who we are as adults. And so there's a lot of things that happen inappropriately with youth. My tongue is a little bit tied today. Please forgive that. Inappropriately with youth. And we already know what the rules and guidelines are. But when you have regard for a student, you are always going to act appropriately. And if you are not acting appropriately, you will probably notice that within yourself. So make caring, actual caring, a practice. Make it like something that you're doing deliberately, something that you're doing consciously. Next slide, please. So look at those faces. Look at the faces of those young people. This is actually current. As you can see, the young boy in the mask at the bottom right, he's wearing a mask in school. That's not unusual now, but it wasn't what happened before the pandemic. They look a little bit tired. They look a little bit, oh my goodness, do I have to do more of this? And you may be encountering that. You may have encountered that last year, last school year. You may be encountering that now. Those faces are why we are here today. Next slide, please. So this is going to be a journaling exercise. And for this journaling exercise, I would like you to please either use your computer, your phone, or either pen and paper. Pen and paper still works, it's like amazing to think about that sometime. I'm going to introduce a concept called do-overs. Now, you've heard the phrase do-over many times in your life, I'm sure. When something has happened, we think about wanting to have a do-over, right? So what I want you to do is think about do-overs in the context of the way that you've been interacting with young people. Now, I want to say this. All of us are growing and learning human beings. We sometimes do things that later, when we check in about it, we go, I wish I didn't say that. I wish I wouldn't have done it that way. That's normal and natural when we're growing, and I don't want you to ever beat yourself up about that. What I would like to invite you to do, though, is to notice all the time what you are saying, what you are doing. So here's the instructions for your journaling exercise. It's going to be done in about 3 minutes, and you're going to literally write something down on your phone, on your computer, on a piece of paper with a pencil or a pen. So choose a real life event with a student, something that you like to do over. Now, don't worry about whether or not you're going to get an opportunity to do it over with that specific student. Just think about something that happened, and when you came away from that experience, you thought, I wish I would have said something different. I wish I would have done it a different way. Think about that event. Do-overs are in order when we don't quite connect or uplift a student. And I know that sometimes we miss the mark because, again, we're human and it's natural. But I want you to always think about connecting and uplifting as the invitation and the way that you're doing what it is that you're doing as an educator. So with kindness for yourself, recall what happened, but do not judge yourself. Don't dwell on the story. Don't think about it. Don't keep thinking about, well, when I did that, last Thursday or last year or whenever. Don't dwell on the story. Instead, imagine what you would do differently if you had an opportunity to do it with that student or any other student in the future. So imagine how you would do the do-over. And then please write it down. One thing that you wish to learn from yourself about how not to do something, and then take note of your reflections because you're wise. You have the ability to self-reflect. You also have the ability to self-correct. And so that's what you're having an opportunity to do now. So I'm going to set my timer. Here's my phone for 3 minutes. And I'd like you to please think, do all the things I just said, but literally do it. You may now start. Wonderful. So if I were in a meeting at Zoom where you could actually see me and I could see you, I would actually invite someone to talk about what it is that they wrote down on their paper. We're not going to get to do that today because I want to move on to what it is I'm delivering in terms of the tool and the methodology. But please keep a note about reviewing what you wrote down. And when you go back to look at it, if you need to, write some more or think some more about it, please do that. So I'd love to see in the chat if this was valuable. So you could just say yes, no, or maybe. I hope I see a lot of yeses, but no and maybe are okay as well. Was the do-over exercise valuable for you? Please put your response in the chat. Yes, no, or maybe. All right, I'm seeing yeses. I'm pleased about that. Yay, I got a big smile over here. Okay, good. Next slide, please. So you're going to get a study guide, and that study guide will actually have 2 articles that I've written. This is the front page of the article that's about the secret language of equity, which is what my work is called. And I'm just going to highlight a few words that you could probably read. Most of it's too small for you to see. One is building trust in schools. So learn the secret language of equity to build trust in school. Building trust in school is what relationships actually thrive on, is trust. A sense of community coupled with regard for students informs the how-to of cultivating genuine relationships with the students targeted in your equity initiatives. And all initiatives are about equity these days. So all of your initiatives, whether it's social emotional learning, trauma-informed care, or educational equity. So next slide, please. So the 4 key practices, I'm just going to let you know what they are. Practice number 1, these have key words. So each of these practices have key words. It's like delivering a message in the word without actually explaining the whole thing, but I will explain the whole thing in just a few minutes. So key practice number 1 is about a student's identity and respecting who they are, their personality. Key practice number 2 is the word environment. An environment is about knowing their story as much as you possibly can, and they're going to deliver that story to you in bite-sized pieces over time, but pay attention to what they tell you about who they are, what they are experiencing, and what their life is like. Key practice number 3, the word is meaning. Look for an understanding of their values. There's lots of different ways we're going to talk about it in a few minutes, but all of us thrive on what brings meaning to our lives. And what informs what brings meaning to our lives is the values that we hold. And so that's true for students as well. And number 4, in this particular webinar is my favorite because it's about the word gifts. That's the key word. I'd like you to acknowledge their strengths. And I'm going to talk about leadership development in regards to that. So I also just wanted to note at the bottom of the page that in the article that you're going to get in your study guide, you'll see 7 key practices. And here in the webinar, there's only 4, but you won't miss out on a thing. So there's lots for you at the study guide. Next slide, please. So key practice number 1, again, I've already said it was identity, but this is about connecting. This is about literally connecting. So each one of the key practices are going to have a 3-step roadmap. I want you to know how to do this. And I really wanted to break it down so that you could understand perfectly what to do. So I'm going to read it, not verbatim, but highlighting everything that I think is important. When you are connecting with your students, do so in authentic ways. That includes you sharing who you are too, okay? As a real person, beyond the customary greetings and all the other things that we sometimes do, like saying good morning or have a good weekend or whatever the case may be. Cultivate meaningful exchanges and share bits of yourself with them as well. I tell the story often, but I love shoes. In fact, the pandemic has me not able to wear my shoes because I don't wear shoes in my home. So I have lots of beautiful shoes and boots that are just sitting there getting dust. But I pay attention to shoes, and I do it with the students as well when I have a chance to connect with them. And so I say, wow, look at those turquoise sneakers. Turquoise happens to be one of my favorite colors. I'm wearing it today. And, you know, those kinds of things are really important. They get to see you, they get to feel you, and you get to see and feel them as well. Notice the little things about them. Look for clues. Look for clues in their clothes, the symbols that you may see on their notebooks or their hats or their whatever. Just pay attention to who they're showing up as. I saw a student only once a week on Wednesday. I did one session once a week on Wednesday with a group of students. And I noticed that every single Wednesday he was wearing orange. And I thought, oh my goodness. So if he's wearing orange every Wednesday, I wonder how often he wears orange. So I asked him one day, I said, is orange your favorite color? He said, yes. And he lit up because he knew that I had noticed him. And so therefore, he told me all about the fact that he has lots of orange this and orange that. And the next thing you know, whenever I'd see him, I'd go like, there's your orange again. And that, of course, built rapport between us. Once you notice those signature things, we're down to the 3rd step on the roadmap. Mention them to your students via compliments or letting them know something in your life that's similar. And so always ask them questions. Like I said, is orange your favorite color? And the answer was yes. And so you're going to get this in your study guide. So don't worry about knowing every single thing that I've said, because you're going to get to review it later. But the feeling of this is that you are really connecting with students and you're showing up authentically and you're paying attention to who they are. You're saying to them, I see you. You're saying to them, I see you. Okay. Next slide, please. So the word again is environment, and it's about their story. So you got to listen. You got to listen to those stories. So the 3-step roadmap is this. Storytelling is easy to implement. It's in fact traditionally present in academic settings. I mean, storytelling is a part of what we do in school, right? We've always done it. Essays are some of the things we used to do, book reports, all of that, you know, everything that is old school and new school is a part of storytelling. But the thing I like to focus in right now, because of modern day times, and I'm learning so much from the young people that I get to connect with, I oftentimes work in middle schools and high schools, is spoken word poetry. And so in the study guide, you're going to get some instructions, actually a video about what's called slam poetry. But make sure that you give an opportunity for students to tell their stories in many different formats. In the format of spoken word, in video projects, you know, people who have videos on their phone these days, whatever it is, let them tell their stories. The next thing on the roadmap is create a regular platform for storytelling. So one of the things you can do is, if you know anything about restorative practices, restorative justice, community circles, you can do those periodically. I consider them to be something that should happen regularly, like once a week at least, if not every day. Morning meetings are usually something that happens every day. But make sure that as you're doing the storytelling, that it's light as well, that it's fun as well. So you can make up things to be game-like or to have some playfulness in the storytelling. It's all up to you. Just be very creative and let the students help you. They have great ideas. Once you let them know that we're going to constantly tell each other our stories, and that that's going to be a part of this culture in your class or with the students that you're serving, then they'll tell you what it is they'd like to do. And one of my favorite storytelling exercise is something that I consider one of the best ways to get to know people over and over again, because you can actually do the same exercise more than once with the same people and they'll give you different answers. If you really knew me, you'd know. For example, if you really knew me, you know that I love social emotional learning, because every chance I get, I'm talking about something that's related to it. And so I would tell you that if you asked me that question. But then again, next week, I might say, if you really knew me, you'd know that I love to dance, which is a completely different thing in a whole other arena, right? But I could tell you all the stories about dancing since I was a little girl, and that even right now I'm called by my granddaughter, at least I was when she was 9. She's no longer 9. She used to call me Disco Granny. So I love to dance. So stories are really important. Make sure you listen to them. We know you love Oprah. It's true. I love Oprah too. That's right. I sure do. I sure do. Why do I love Oprah? Let me just take a minute to say that since you put it into the chat. So I'm a baby boomer. Can you imagine that when Oprah came on the scene so many years ago? I mean, she was on television for 25 years, and I think she stopped about 5 years or so ago. So 30 years ago or so was the first time we got a chance to meet this person called Oprah. She's an African-American woman. There weren't very many African-American women on TV who got such attention. So she reflected me. So of course, I paid attention to Oprah for my whole life. This is what equity is about, seeing representation. So I just wanted to share that little story about me on the side. Next slide, please. Thank you for putting that in the chat. So of course, the next one is about meaning. And I'm going to slow down a little bit about this one, because this one is going into a little bit of a deeper arena in terms of understanding young people and interacting with them. The key word is meaning, and it's about understanding their values. And the word that's there, the one word that I put there is embrace. Now, we know that everybody has different values, and we know that sometimes we don't relate to other people's values. But as an adult mentor, and I consider that if you're an educator, you're an adult mentor, it's important for you to at least begin to understand where young people are coming from. And so here's how you do that. The 3-step roadmap consists of this. Notice after you've connected with students in those authentic ways, notice how they respond to you. And then utilize the things that you've learned regarding what they care about in your lesson plans and in your classroom activities. So for example, I talked about shoes, and I was the one who talked about shoes, but just say if a student told you that they loved shoes, I mean, could you use shoes in a lesson plan somewhere? I think you could. You could talk about the history of shoes and shoemaking. You could talk about what cultures are actually known for shoemaking. You could talk about things like what, you could see visuals, like what are the ways that shoes have evolved over time. I mean, there's so many things that you could do about that. And that's just a simple example that I'm really talking to you about off the top of my head. I didn't even know I was going to say that about lesson plans being related to shoes. And so make sure that you're capturing that and reflecting back to them what it is that's important to them. So the next key practice is all about inclusion. Now, inclusion is a formal practice. It's something that I actually do a lot of, because in my other life, one of my other jobs, I work in more than one place, it feels like some days. I get to function as a not complete full-time, but a substantial amount of my time as a chief inclusion officer. And so inclusion plays a big role in this particular practice. Inclusion is about pointing and incorporating things that are from a variety of ethnic cultures, from LGBTQ plus values, from as many thought-provoking ideas, and I would say diverse things as possible. Now, I wrote non-traditional things there, and I realized that that PowerPoint didn't get changed. But one of my colleagues at the Museum of Tolerance, her name is Linda Blanchet, said, can we change that so that you don't use the word tradition? And I understand why, because traditions are beautiful things. We want to keep those traditions in place. There's no reason for us not to have traditions. What we want is diversity and diverse experience around traditions. So as you're doing things around inclusion, make sure that you talk about traditions, but make sure that you are offering diverse points of views, diverse cultures, diverse experiences, diverse life experiences, okay? And so the third practice would be, the third step on this roadmap is you get to share yourself. Again, you get to share yourself. Share one or more of your own values and things that represent meaning in your life. And you'll think about this carefully. You will definitely do it from a place of not polarizing. You don't want to talk about, for example, political things in class. You want to talk about things that might be related to political things, like, wouldn't it be wonderful if we all felt like we belonged? That may be one of your values. It's certainly one of mine. I would love for everybody to think about the fact that we all want to be valued and we all want to belong. That's one of my values. So provide kind reflections to your students about things that they tell you, such as the thing that I just said. If somebody says, you know, it should be this way or that way or whatever, you can ask a question. You might even say something like, have you ever thought about it this way? Have you ever thought about the fact that we wouldn't even need that if we all felt welcome to be who we are? You know, so there's all kinds of ways to work with students so that they understand that you are respecting their values, but you also may be presenting another point of view that's important for them to be exposed to. And also make group agreements in your class for you to stay respectful when you're talking about values, to literally say, can we all agree that we're going to have these particular guidelines when we're talking about things that are related to our values and meaning in our life? Next slide, please. So the very last thing, again, my favorite, is the keyword gifts, and it's about the student's strengths. And when we know someone's strengths, we can help them build on those strengths. So we're uplifting them because we can help build on those strengths. And so the 3-step roadmap, you probably have heard of Myers-Briggs before and some of the other personality typing things that are out there. So there's one that I like. It's actually was created by, it's called Strengths Finders. And I think it's called Strengths Quest for students and for educators. And it was created by the Gallup Poll Organization, the ones who find out everything about how things work in the United States and maybe around the world. And so they have it, and you're going to have that in your study guide as well. There'll be a link to Strengths Quest so that you can find out what the actual strengths are that your students carry, their talents, their innate talents. And so one of the things you can do is to do that as an exercise. It's fun. One that I've also used recently is the Enneagram. The Enneagram can also be found online if you want to look that up. But there are many things out there that you can use for young people to tell you their strengths. And you can also just ask them, what do they love to do? What are they good at? So the next step on that roadmap is to set up an ongoing means for students to showcase their leadership skills. So what do I mean by that? I mean to have your class set up so that young people get to be a part of what it is that's happening in leadership roles over time, again and again and again. Meaning that if somebody is, like, for example, the teacher, Mrs. Duncan for Oprah, she was a fine reader, right? We know that Oprah loves books. She's had book clubs for her whole career, right? But she was a really good reader as a child. So there are people that have skills and talents. And probably when she was in front of the class reading something, people were paying attention to that because they enjoyed the fact that it was natural for her to be a good reader. So make sure that you find out as often as you can what each one of your students' strengths are and let them lead in those areas. That's what this is about. That's what the second step in the roadmap is about. And in fact, you can implement something called students get to lead today. Students get to teach today. Sign up on a list for this week or this month or for this subject. Make it a part of what it is that you do in class, that students actually get to do some of the teaching. That's what this is about. Let them express their strengths. They will become leaders more easily and probably without you even knowing it, right under your nose, if you just call on them to share themselves in their leadership capacity. So next slide, please. So we're almost done, but not quite, because we're going to get into a situation now where I want you to ask me questions. So if you need to stand up, so I love cats. That's another thing about me. I like to share myself. So this cat stretching, just, I don't know, it's something about it. It makes me feel happy when I see the cat stretching. So if you've been sitting for a while, if this is the end of your workday, like it's the end of mine, then please stand up and give yourself a little stretch. And we'll just do that. Stretch your neck. This is also a part of social emotional learning, everybody. It's taking care of yourself, not just thinking only about the students. That's a part of your study guide as well. I've actually included a piece in my study guide so that you can take care of yourself as the educator, as the teacher, as the one who's always giving forth output. So done with your stretch now, your shoulders a little bit. All right, move to the next slide, please. So now we're going to get some questions in here. So I call this real-time speed coaching. And I wanted to make sure that I left some time for this. And so you're going to get to put in the chat, I believe, some questions, and then some of the team from LACOE are going to actually share with me what those questions are, and I'm going to answer them as best I can. So this is Q&A with me. I want it to be relevant for you. The reason why I have this section is because usually in a webinar, people are talking at you and they're sharing with you their methodologies like I just did. But I know that you're going to get to study this methodology because I've made sure that your study guide had a lot of things in it for you to continue to review what it is that I've said today. But what I really want to do with you now is to be able to answer your direct questions about things that are happening in your life at school right now with students. So who has a question for me?
So we're ready in the chat, Dr. Malia. I'm waiting for questions.
Okay, good.
First question. Asking for, let's be specific. I'm sorry, let me get the first question first. Okay, specifically ideas for modifying methods for young students, i.e. transitional kindergarten and other age students.
Yes, absolutely. I'm so glad you asked that question. By the way, the study guide will give you an actual workbook that goes all the way from kindergarten to high school. So
there's another piece also that talks about showing destructive behaviors due to experienced traumas.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so first of all, the only difference between a younger student and an older student is age. They still want to be valued. They still want to be connected with. They still want to have you let them know that you care about them. So with a young person, the thing that I talk about a lot is coming down to their level. Now, what I mean by that is if you're working on, you probably work on the floor in kindergarten, at least we used to. Again, I'm old school, but so being at eye level is really important when you're connecting with a person. To be able to see their eyes and for them to see your eyes is extremely important for the connection to happen. And sometimes students who have been experiencing trauma and destructive behaviors and have been acting out and have had things happen to them that we may not even know what those things are, they may have their head down. And you can say things like, and this is the way I do it. I say, sweetheart, I know you have your head down, but I would love to see your eyes. You know, and so what you're doing is bringing forth in your energy in your words, in just the whole kind of stance that you're taking, that caring is exuding from you, okay? Even when young people are doing destructive behavior, what we want to do is actually get them to stop. And what I do is ask questions. If you were to do that for 5 more minutes, do you think you could stop after that? Now that may be radical, but the point of view is that you're asking the young people to take part in the intervention. If you were to do that, and maybe 5 minutes is too long. If you were to do that for another minute or 2, would you be willing to stop after so we could talk? I mean, just scream as loud as you want. And so there's a way that you want to engage them to think with you about how to actually enact an intervention. And if we were together in a room and I were actually getting to coach you in a situation where students were doing that, you would get to see more about what I'm talking about. But I think you have a feel for it now. The most important thing for you to do is to always keep in touch with your, I know you have this value already, with your value of wanting to care about students and wanting to keep their well-being at heart. When you do that, they can feel it. But negotiating with them and asking questions in that negotiation so that an answer has to be given so that they can make an agreement with you. Well, okay, if you let me scream for 2 minutes, maybe I will stop. It may not work every time, but you can just try it and see. There's so much that you're going to get to read about later, though, about this. And the reason why I'm taking so much time with this is because this is a really important question. Is there another question? I hope I answered it sufficiently and I could just say so much more.
We don't have another question yet.
Okay. It's almost time for us to be done anyway, but is there one more question, one more little question? And the person who, I think it was Lauren who asked me that question. Lauren, did I answer that question all right for you? Thanks for the insight. Will the study guide be emailed after this webinar? Yes.
Yes.
Lauren, did I give you something to work with in the answer to that question about young people and them being expressing destructive behavior? I
So
believe.
Lauren is saying that she's also concerned with physical aggression.
Yes, yes. Physical aggression is not, I'm just going to be honest about it. It's not my strong suit. But what I do about physical aggression is I'll say things that are vulnerable. Again, this is my way. I'll say, for example, I'm going to pretend like I'm the one who's being aggressive. Aliah, sweetie, if you kick like that, you might hurt me. I'm like, you know, I bruise easy. Oh my goodness. And I'll say things like letting them know that I'm a person and that I'm fragile. And there's a way that they will want to help if you can get in there with something that triggers their humanity. So what you're doing is trying to reflect to them that you're fragile, that you have feelings, that you understand that they're fragile and that they have feelings, and that you want to be human together with them and you want to figure it out as a team. That's part of what happens. And so I tell young people that I'm afraid. I'd go like, oh my goodness, you're scaring me right now. Oh, you're scaring me right now. Oh, can you just, can you help me with this? Because I'm feeling really scared. And I do that. Is there a way to balance remediation and social emotional support? I'd love to answer more questions. And oh my God, this is my favorite part. But here's what I can say. I promise to be done and leave minutes at the end. And the minute has come for us to be done. We're supposed to be done completely at 4:30. And I promise to be done at 4:22. And that's what time it is. So I want to thank you for your questions. Here's what I'd like to do. For the questions that are left in the chat, I'd like them to be emailed to me. And if there's a way for me to get my answers to you, I will do that. I will answer your questions as best as I possibly can, either with my words or resources, okay? So that you can have those things answered. And really, I'm going to tell you that your study guide is very complete. I made sure that you had the most complete study guide that I could possibly produce in the amount of time that I had to produce it. So thank you again for your questions. And now I'm going to turn it over back to LACOE because it's time for us to be done.
I would like to welcome back Dr. Aliah to introduce the closing webinar video and to close out our first series. Dr. Aliah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Janice. And thank you everyone who is here. And here's what I want to say. We didn't talk a lot about the Museum of Tolerance, but the Museum of Tolerance loaned me to LACOE. So you need to know that I work consistently with the Museum of Tolerance around social emotional learning. In your study guide, you're going to get a specific set of links to be able to sign up to bring your students and or your family to the Museum of Tolerance and to learn all that we have to offer there. There's so much to be offered there. In the videos that I created for you, I talk about some of the specific exhibits. One of them is called Finding Our Families, Finding Ourselves. And it's really my favorite exhibit in the sense that it's not at all historical in terms of academics. It's historical and relationship-based in terms of who we are as human beings. And Maya Angelou is featured there. There's just lots of folks that are there who you get to see who their life is and what their history is and why they are who they are in the world. So this is all about storytelling. So now, the video that I've chosen for you is by Alicia Keys. The song is Underdog. And I want you to, in particular, look at the visuals. I wanted this to be the closing today because we are all a part of having been an underdog for some reason and at some point in our lives. And a lot of times the students that we're serving right now feel like they're in those positions as well. What Alicia does is share with us that everybody matters, and the visuals will let you know, and her music will bring that home. So please enjoy, and thank you very much for listening to me today. All right, let's put on the video.